Folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the relationship between price inflation, so prices of all things going up, could be food or consumer goods, whatever, prices going up, and the rate of inflation and the central bank, Fed in the US, but the central bank response in terms of increasing or lowering interest rates. So now there was a clear relationship in the days before globalization. There was a clear relationship between interest rates and inflation and the amount of money in circulation. So if there was price inflation, what it meant, there was too much money chasing too few goods, and therefore that was forcing up the price due to a temporary or artificial scarcity of all that money chasing the certain amount of goods and services. Now, my view of that as an economics student was to say, well, if there is bigger demand, then all the manufacturers and suppliers need to do is increase their output, and that will damp down inflation and also give them additional sales and costs. Now, the economic argument there is that to go to the next stage of production, the factories, for example, have to buy more plant, more equipment, or expand the size of the premises or something like that. But to make major long-term investment decisions, and thus it's not something that can be immediately responded to. But inflation can move up fairly quickly, more quickly than it'll take for the private sector or the service and goods manufacturing sector to adjust to a higher level of output, which would also have the effect of damping down inflation, insofar as the demand and supply would be in equilibrium. Now, I never really bought that as a super valid argument. For example, if a factory's running one shift, why don't they run 2 shifts or 3 shifts and increase production that way? The comeback argument is, hey, there's a lot of skilled jobs here. We can't just make skilled people appear out of the ether, and so we don't want to artificially push up demand for these skilled workers across numerous industries, because then that causes inflation itself, even the wage inflation, given the demand for the skilled labour, and so. So there's a number of interactive things there, but the basic premise was, if you get too much money chasing more goods and services than chasing too few goods and services, rather, that will create price inflation as manufacturers put up their prices, or wholesalers and distributors and so on put up their prices to take advantage of this extra cash that's floating around. Now, on the other side, the quantity of money in circulation is also an issue. Let's suppose the government decides to go to war, and the government takes an unusual or artificially unusual, given that it doesn't last forever, takes a lot of money out of the system that otherwise will be available for private investment and private consumption, private production, takes that money out to prosecute the war. That doesn't mean that some expenditures won't feed back into the private sector, for example, arms manufacturers and so on, but effectively the government's taken away that money from a variety of businesses, private consumer businesses, ranging from a small factory of whatever, making lounge suites or kitchen furniture, and has taken money away from the guy who wants to open up a restaurant or a cafe, and so that means that there's less money going around, therefore the money is more valuable, therefore interest rates increase. So those were the two causes of price inflation and or the money in circulation shortage that led to increases in interest rates. Now we've had a decoupling of that. The era of globalization has decoupled, if you like, logical economics, and has taken us into the realms of fantasy economics. Just keep on printing money, that sort of thing. Now, just recently, the central bank in Australia increased interest rates, and not brutally or punitively so, but increased them. There's arguments that they kept the interest rates low for a little bit too long, and then they're upping them too quickly. Putting those arguments aside, but they've increased the interest rate because the argument is, as I understand it at least, the argument is that there's still way too much money chasing residential real estate. So on that basis, and it seems on that basis alone, because there's no other area of the economy that's got any evidence of a lot of money chasing it, maybe the government throwing money around, that sort of thing, hiring too many diversity officers or whatever. But there's no sign that there's any price inflation that is as a result of too much money chasing the goods and services. If anything, it's the opposite. You could say that multinational companies internationally are putting up their prices in a very coordinated effort, and these are all very big pro-globalist outfits, the ones that are bringing out lots of black and brown peasants from the third world and so on. So it's a globalist gig, but there's no price inflation as a result of local people in Australia having too much money in their pockets and they're chasing too few goods and services. Now, if anything, is the opposite case. Everyone I know who owns a restaurant or a cafe or anything like that says business is notably slowing. So they're putting off staff. They whatever staff they've got, they're on sort of rando casual hours, and if someone's not available at short notice for a casual shift, then fine, they're not needed. So worker rights are disappearing out of the window here. There's and if you go to the grocery stores, the amount of stuff that's in the markdown section, perishable goods, doesn't matter, meat or milk, I don't know, whatever, bread, and they're all on markdown, and the markdown section is bigger now than I ever remember it. So there's too few goods. If you look at the higher priced premium goods, they seem to be permanently on special these days, suggesting that they can't shift them at anywhere near the standard shelf price. So there's certainly no inflation anywhere in the economy that I can see. There's definitely no wage inflation, certainly not at the bottom end anyway. 80% of the jobs have got almost no wage inflation. So let's just have a look at this residential real estate. Now, I've been around to a number of auctions around, and if you see any white people at all, they're spectators. So pretty much every auction is the property auction. The buyer is brown or not so much black around here, brown, Chinese, Indian, that sort of thing. Every buyer is brown, and they're all talking they're all talking either Hindi or whatever it is, or talking Mandarin Chinese and so on. So there's no locals buying the property, certainly not I can see. So let's look at the auction clearance rates now in Sydney, which is the most expensive city in Australia. The auction clearance rates, depending on whose numbers you look at, are between 71 and 77% clearance rate. That means for every 100 properties that are up for auction, they're typically on weekends. Sometimes you get outside of that, but every property is up for auction, or every 100 properties rather, say 75. Let's say three out of four, 75 are clear, which is a high clearance rate for auctions. Now, those numbers are a little bit misleading because the properties listed for auction, a number of them get sold prior to the actual auction taking place. So it's a private contract between a buyer and a seller. And there's between 12 and 15% there. So really the clearance rate is 90% of every 100 property in Sydney. This is 100 properties that there are, and this has been recently. So the central bank says, well, gee, look at that auction clearance rate. There's way too much money sloshing around in the real estate sector, so we need to jack the interest rates up and try and tame this inflation, because the prices of properties are going up as well. So you're looking like an average price property for auction is like $1.6 million. I mean, fuck. So, and this isn't all waterfront mansions or anything, far from it. 1.6 million now gets you an ordinary 3-bedroom place, maybe 25 miles, 30 miles out of the downtown. So in an area that's not, not an upmarket area at all. It's not serviced with particularly good schools and so on. So if you want the area that's serviced well, nice tree-lined, quiet streets and all that sort of thing, you're stumping up double that, 3 million plus if you want that sort of lifestyle, closer to 4 million now. So the prices of real estate are going up, but there's no local buyers. Everywhere I go to look at an auction or look at the people that are queuing up for it or anything like that, there's hardly ever a white face in sight. And if it is a white face, it's somebody who lives a few doors down the road has just come along as a spectator. They're not bidding. And if you do see any bidding, they're knocked out in the first few show of hands at the auction. So the only players in it are again the Chinese, the rich Chinese Communist Party generals or the rich Brahmins out of India. That's all. And you're looking at properties that are, they're going to auction for $3 million plus, and you're looking at these Brahmin Indians who've got rich daddies and everything, swanning around in their 20s, swanning around, and then you maybe have a chat to them if you can, and think, oh no, I just want this as an investment property. I mean, how much fucking money do you have? You're in your 20s, you've never worked, never had a job, and you've got 3 million cash spared to buy an investment property. I mean, holy shit. Anyway, these are the people that are buying the property. So why is the central bank saying that offshore buyers, they're not locals, they're not the local people working in their 9-to-5 jobs, the offshore buyers that are coming in from overseas are buying up swathes of fucking property, and because they're very active people and local businesses and local people who've got a mortgage, they have to now pay a higher rate. Why not just stop the offshore buying? Or why not, if you can't stop it or don't want to stop it, why not tax it heavily so it becomes a revenue, a stream of windfall revenue to the government? Why not do that? These people are very rich and they're really just money laundering. That's really all they're doing. So they don't care what they pay. They can just casually put multiple millions on the table without even blinking. So that if you slap them 10 or 20%, like a foreign transaction fee or something like that, they wouldn't even shrug their shoulders over that. Maybe they won't be happy about it, but it's effortless for them to afford that. They're not working 9 to 5 to make their money or anything. They've got monopolies, oligopolies, and cartels in the home country, and they just want to launder the money here in the West and get bragging rights of, guess what, I own 5 properties and 10 properties, whatever, in Australia or America or wherever it might be, in the West, in the white West. That's where they want to own the property. So clearly, in my view, clearly the central bank is hurting local people, whilst again, these offshore gazillionaires, they don't give a fuck about whether the interest rates goes up a 0.25% or 0.5% or anything like that. It's immaterial to them. They don't give a shit. So really, the central bank, I believe, has made a gross error. Now, just having a look at the cost of servicing these mortgages. Let's say the average price of 1.6 million. Again, if you want a nice place, you're paying double that. But this is average of the average. You're not in a fancy area here. You're not nice enough, I suppose. It's okay. It's not down the bottom, but it's nothing fancy. You're going to be surrounded by a lot of brown people. Whereas once you get to the 3 to 4 million plus, then you've got quite a small number of brown people. But let's suppose 1.6 million. Now, depending on which bank or whatever you're with, your interest rate, your repayments are going to be about $90,000, give or take, between $85,000 and $90,000 per annum. Now, at a minimum, assuming you're running a car and putting food on the table, paying electricity bill and putting some clothes on your back, without having children, without any annual vacations or any vacations at all, just an absolute entry-level minimum, you would need to be in the top 1% of income earners at a minimum. Now, even then, you'd be struggling. If you're out of work for even a week or something like that, you'd hit the wall. It'd be that tight on the top 1%. Now, and if you needed, say that's for single income. Now, if you then had two incomes, given the differing tax thresholds and so on, if you had two incomes, you would need to be in, assuming both of you were making, this sort of money, two income earners on the same money, which was unlikely. You'd have to be in the top 23% of income earners to be able to afford. And again, that's tight. That is really tight. Again, you miss a week of work or something, you're fucked. So you'd effectively want a bigger cushion than that. So that would drop you down to, say, 15% of the population for a double income, and say one in every 250 workers income. So very, very small income there. A quarter of 1% would be making enough money to service a mortgage, and that's the average. Remember, that's an average place. Nothing fancy here. Now, if you want to, look at, a nice enough place, or even an ordinary place, but in a nice area, you'd be looking at annual mortgage payments of close to 200,000. This, by the way, assumes you've got a 20% deposit. To them, so if you're getting a $3 million, for example, $3 million house, this would assume you've got $600,000 to put on the table. So this is a if your repayments just on the mortgage, this is before you pay the car or anything like that, before you send your kids or have kids and send them to a good school, you need $200,000 a year to make the payments. Now, so this means you're looking at one in every 930 workers is making enough money to service that those sort of costs. So that gives you an idea to how few Australians or domestic people, citizens here, how few can actually purchase properties, even at the average and going above the average to the upper end. Very, very few can afford to do it. Whereas all the buyers at the auction, certainly that I'm seeing and around the place, are all offshore. They're not fucking local. Now, they may be scamming it and using local nominees, or where the illiterate cleaner that somehow magically owns 10 properties on an income of 50,000 a year. That sort of, but the government should be really doing something about that. That's a scam of the first order. So if the government were to get onto this and stop the offshore buying, then they could very easily take the heat out of the real estate market and very easily give the central bank cause to not be so keen to increase interest rates. So that's just my take on it, but it illustrates just how decoupled reality economics has become from globalist economics. Now, and I'll close with this. For pretty much every politician in Australia, more than half their total income comes from real estate speculation and the properties they own that are enjoying, bonanza type rental incomes, and they're going to maintain this as much as heavy a demand as possible for real estate, whether it be rental real estate or whatever, because that's where a lot of their income, more than half their income, comes from. So this is something to factor into the equation as well. Maybe the politicians in the West don't want to stop it because so much of their money now comes from real estate speculation. You've been a Tassels today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.